It was a quiet Sunday afternoon in the Canary Islands. On March 27th, 1977, two Boeing 747s, among the largest aircraft in the world at the time, found themselves rerouted to a tiny airport on the island of Tenerife. Within hours, that airport would be the site of the deadliest accident in aviation history. Over 580 people would lose their lives, not because of mechanical failure, but because of fog, confusion, and a devastating misunderstanding. The story of the Tenerife disaster begins not with a crash, but with a bomb. Earlier that day, a terrorist explosion had gone off at Gran Canaria Airport, the main hub of the Canary Islands. In response, several incoming flights, including KLM Flight 4805 and Pan Am Flight 1736, were diverted to the much smaller Los Rodeos Airport on the neighboring island of Tenerife. Los Rodeos was never meant to handle that kind of traffic. The airport had only one runway and limited taxi space. As the diverted flights crowded the tarmac, conditions quickly deteriorated. And then a heavy fog rolled in. The two aircraft involved were massive 747 jumbo jets. KLM's plane was captained by Jacob Veldhuizen van Zanten, a highly respected pilot and one of the airline's top instructors. The Pan Am flight, meanwhile, was led by Captain Victor Grubbs, a seasoned aviator with decades of experience. Despite their expertise, both crews would soon find themselves entangled in a disastrous chain of miscommunication, and the airport, with its outdated equipment and overworked staff, was completely unequipped to prevent what was coming. As the fog thickened, visibility at Los Rodeos dropped to just a few hundred feet. KLM was ready for takeoff and was positioned at the start of the only runway. Behind them, Pan Am was taxiing along the same runway, but had been instructed to exit at the third taxiway and wait. But here's where things started to go wrong. The air traffic controller's instructions were vague, spoken in heavily accented English, and easily misunderstood. The taxiways were poorly marked. Pan Am missed the intended exit. KLM, assuming the runway was now clear, radioed for takeoff clearance. The controller responded with the phrase, "Okay, stand by for takeoff," followed shortly by, "You are cleared for takeoff." But the second message was not a clear command. It was intended to confirm their takeoff position, not to give final clearance. In the fog and under pressure, the KLM captain misunderstood. He pushed the throttles forward. At 5:06 p.m., the KLM 747 began accelerating down the runway. At the same time, the Pan Am crew, still taxiing on that same runway, spotted the looming lights of the KLM jet barreling toward them through the fog. Captain Grubbs shouted, "Get off! Get off!" as his first officer turned sharply to the left, desperately trying to clear the path. But it was too late. The KLM jet, already committed to takeoff, couldn't stop in time. It struck the Pan Am aircraft broadside, shearing off its upper fuselage and igniting a massive fireball. Both planes erupted into flames. The runway was instantly engulfed in chaos. Everyone aboard the KLM flight perished, 248 people in total. On the Pan Am plane, some passengers and crew in the front sections managed to escape before the fire consumed the cabin. 61 people survived, but 335 others did not. In total, 583 lives were lost in what remains the deadliest aviation accident not caused by terrorism or sabotage. The investigation was swift and damning. It concluded that the primary cause was the KLM captain's premature takeoff, compounded by miscommunication with air traffic control and the poor visibility on the ground. But blame alone didn't bring closure. It took years for the aviation industry to fully process what happened that day. The Tenerife disaster reshaped how the world communicates in the skies. New protocols were introduced, including mandatory use of standardized English in international flights. Pilots and controllers alike were trained to use unambiguous phrases. In aviation, clarity is not just important. It's a matter of life and death. Every word spoken in a cockpit or control tower is governed by strict standards. There's no room for assumption, no tolerance for guesswork. But in the past, it wasn't always that way. In the years following the Tenerife Airport disaster, investigators found something deeply unsettling. Not a single catastrophic error, but a collection of small human ones, harmless in isolation, but lethal when combined. The weather played a part. So did pressure, routine, and the subtle hierarchy of authority in the cockpit. But most haunting of all was the silence, the hesitation to speak, the feeling, for some crew members, that questioning a decision was unthinkable, even when everything felt wrong. And so, nearly 600 people lost their lives, not to sabotage, not to failure of machinery, but to misunderstanding and miscommunication. It became the deadliest accident in aviation history, but it did not go ignored. In the aftermath, a wave of reforms swept through the aviation industry. One of the most significant was the global introduction of Crew Resource Management, or CRM. It was a radical idea at the time that any member of the flight crew, regardless of rank, should be empowered to speak up, challenge decisions, and assert concerns without fear of overstepping. In the old days, the cockpit was ruled by a clear chain of command. Captains gave orders. Subordinates followed. CRM changed that, turning the flight deck into a team, not a hierarchy. Air traffic communication also changed. Language was tightened. Ambiguous phrases were removed from official vocabulary. The word takeoff, once used loosely, became restricted, spoken only when final clearance had been given. Nothing was left to interpretation. Nothing was assumed. These changes didn't just stay on paper. They were drilled into training programs, built into checklists, and reinforced with every takeoff and landing around the world. And over time, they worked. Aviation, once full of unknowns, became one of the safest forms of travel in human history. But that safety was paid for in blood. It's easy to look at statistics and feel reassured. But behind every safety measure is a name, a face, a family. Behind every checklist, a tragedy. Behind every new protocol, a lesson learned far too late.